Good evening. Welcome, everyone, as people get joined. How are we doing tonight, team?
Doing
Fantastic.
great.
It was
Yeah.
awesome.
Let's do this.
Awesome. Well, we've got a pretty packed schedule here tonight. We've got five very different backgrounds, a lot of great energy, lots of good stories and risks to share. So, as you join, feel free to join either on your computer or on your phone. We will have some slides and some resources as well. So, if you feel like looking at your phone or your computer, that's great. And if you're just on audio tonight, that is no problem at all. Just a bit of housekeeping as everyone gets involved. Uh, if you want to actually view the slides, you can adjust how Zoom looks on your screen. You can see the slides and me or change things around with the speakers about what's best for you. So on your computer, switch between speaker view, gallery view using the button in the top right. Or if you're on your phone or a tablet, just swipe left or right. Now, don't worry, we don't get that feedback as far as whether you swipe left or right on us. No worries. It's really just adjusting your view. So need to say that. After I make a statement like that, of course, you got to say disclaimer, not providing legal advice. We're just giving some thoughts, opinions, some industry knowledge based on our experience. So, as always, if you are looking for some professional advice or legal advice, please seek the appropriate professional around that. So, you all signed up for this. What are we going to do? Well, today's session, you're going to walk away with the top 5 hidden risks, in our opinion, that landlords often miss. So our panel of experienced landlords will show you what to watch for, how to avoid trouble, and the simplest steps you can take in order to protect both your rentals as well as your income. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, so you'll see in Zoom there is a Q&A button that you can press to ask something. There's also a chat. The chat's really more for you to engage. We won't really be monitoring that for questions. So if you do want our panelists to look at something at the end, feel free to drop something in the Q&A and we'll work hard to get to that. As well as at the end, whether you're able to stay to the end or whether you have to leave early, we're going to provide you with 5 resources. So each one of us has provided something special for tonight as a takeaway, as well as we'll be sending out the recording for everyone. So you can either rewatch this evening or just use the resources and the contact information to get a hold of us. So who are these 5 floating heads? Well, we've got Kayla here. She is the founder of Ontario Landlords Watch. She's been an advocate for the housing industry since she became a landlord at 18. And if you haven't heard of Ontario Landlords Watch, you must not be from Ontario, but they have been one of the more vocal and powerful groups within Ontario fighting for landlords as well as improving the housing industry for all. She's also ambassador for Landlord Credit Bureau and Front Lobby. And tonight she's going to be talking about overcoming overcrowding in the rental space. We also have Corey. He is a partner at Strategic Success Consulting. He built an 8-figure portfolio by the age of 36, which is super impressive, specializing in conversions, renovations, and multifamily investments. Now, Corey coaches investors through strategic success, sharing proven roadmaps to financial freedom. And he'll be talking about some of the risks post move-in. We also have Danielle. She is the CEO of Strategic Success. She is an experienced real estate investor. She specializes in residential redevelopments as well as multifamily projects. And she is a dedicated mentor who empowers new and experienced investors with practical strategies for how to deal with real estate. She's going to be talking about risky lease agreements. We also have Mario. He is the broker of record and owner at Armani Realty. He's got nearly 20 years of experience in the GTA real estate market, and he's known for giving practical advice and investor focus, as well as trusted leadership. He's going to be talking about the insurance and liability gaps that landlords often deal with in this space. And I'm Grant. I'm part of the founding team at Front Lobby. I've been an investor in both real estate as well as growth companies for about 15 years and spend my days helping landlords, companies, and the people around me grow, and specifically around dealing with rental payments and the credit system. So we're all excited tonight. As you can see, we've got a diverse set of backgrounds. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different risks. So the format of what we're going to go through, each individual is going to be talking through the risks for about 8 or 10 minutes. Then we'll transition through. At the end, we'll get to your Q&As. So thanks again for joining. We'll have some poll questions that pop up as we're going along. Feel free to engage with those so you can see the resources from everyone else. But to kick things off, we're going to turn it over to none other than Kayla. Kayla, why don't you share with us a little bit of your thoughts for overcrowding?
Oh, well, let's get into what overcrowding actually is. So, this is obviously going to very much fluctuate between which area you are. Some go based on a square footage, some go based on children and adults in just a bedroom. So, just for an example, for Cambridge, is 2 adults per bedroom. For children, they count as half an adult. So, you're allowed having 4 children technically in a bedroom before it's considered overcrowding. Now, you want to also look at the national standards, which is agencies like Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation defines overcrowding. Everything is going to be fluctuating, but I like to go based on 2 adults per bedroom. That's usually what I like to kind of sit in other areas like Waterloo. Sometimes they just like to go on the square footage. So keep that in mind. Do your research where you are to kind of identify what is going to be considered overcrowding. Why is it a risk? It's going to be a risk on many different fronts. One, it's about the safety for the tenants. Two, it's about bringing a lot of risk from municipalities trying to introduce landlord licensing because of the overcrowding. You also have an insurance factor where some people don't quite know, and it's a lot of it's going to come to you through this takeaway, which is going to be sent to you by the front lobby team, giving you more information of what you can deal with from the insurance side. But if you are actually renting to multiple tenants who are not related, this could be considered a rooming house or a boarding house to your insurance company, where they may cancel your policy, they may charge you a higher premium, and they may just cancel the policy altogether in a way that you're going to be fully responsible for the damages for that in particular unit if there's like anything that happens. So now again, we sit back and understand like, well, the landlords are not overcrowding. What happens if our tenants do the overcrowding? How does that work into why is it our responsibility if it was out of our control? And that's going to be a lot of preventative measures for you to take in consideration. One, when we're going through the tenant screening process, we want to analyze and make it very clear to the tenants at the time of tenancy that there is a bylaw. This is the bylaw. So you're putting that in a verbal with the tenants as you're screening the unit, and you're also putting it in your lease clause, the maximum that it has to go with the city bylaw. This is a way for you to try to protect yourself, also identifying that it is a risk to the tenants that it could result in an eviction if they do decide to bring in other tenants into the rental units. And you're going to start to figure out how that kind of works into how do we know? How do we know that they're overcrowding? Well, we're going to get ourselves into doing a little bit more inspections on the rental unit. Obviously, you're going to talk to other people in the rental properties because you'll sometimes find out from other tenants that they have multiple people in there. Also, you could potentially have cameras on your property. And the reason why we also have to consider is that there's a lot of wear and tear on your property. And it's also a lot of utilities that could be using because of the overcrowding that's happening. And it's causing tensions between your community because of the fact that we have noise and we have garbage and overflow and the parking and the conflicts of the neighbors actually calling bylaw on you. So this is why we really need to be concerned. My big concern is the insurance because I do not want my insurance company canceling me. And this is where we don't want municipal bylaws to also come into play where we have landlord licensing because communities are being outspoken to their elected officials and concerned about a certain property that has a lot of people inside of it. Now, that could be the landlord doing it, or it could be the tenant. I make that very clear as I'm advocating. But the red flags that we need to consider is making sure that your insurance company is knowing what's happening there and make sure you have something from your insurance company stating the type of coverage you have. So if it does happen, so if we do get ourselves into a situation where there is overcrowding, either by yourself or from the tenants, now we want to take action. We have to, one, we try to prevent it, but they didn't listen. So now we have to get ourselves into issuing notice. So when you're going to do in your inspection, so do your 24-hour written inspection to come in to analyze if you do see any red flags that the tenants are indeed overcrowding. Now, before I jump into like what we're going to do into like we're dealing with the problem, because I'm always like about what strategies can we deal with the problem. In the chat, I'm going to pull up my window here for the chat. Has anyone dealt with overcrowding in their unit? Because I think this is going to be key into seeing how big of a problem it is. Because I think rental rates are definitely becoming very high, and we are going to see a lot of people congregating together, and this is something that, it become a problem for many of us, and we got to know actually how to deal with it once it does happen. So just take your time there. If you're driving, then we'll get it back to you later, but definitely email me because I want to know. So now that you're dealing with an overcrowding situation, you're getting yourself into identifying the problem and getting as much evidence as you possibly can. This is key into bringing this to the landlord and tenant board. But at the same time, you're going to try to work with this tenant before having to go to the landlord and tenant board. So you're going to write them a letter, tell them that through your inspection that you identified that there's more people in the unit that allows through bylaw, give them the definition of what the bylaw is so they know that you're not trying to be this type of greedy little landlord trying to kick out their family members, and also consider if they're family or are they unrelated. I think that's going to be a very big difference in for the insurance company. Then after you're following up with the letter of concern, it would, and they ignore it, then you'd be working with the N5 application, doing the date and the time of the inspection and identifying the steps of what the tenant now needs to do in order to avoid the application. A lot of people will put down the date, the time. Tenant has a lot of people in the unit. Well, you need to also get yourself into, well, why? Why is the sorry, the pop-up messed me up, Grant.
You can just close it out. While you do that, I'll maybe let people know if you can't see it.
I know, it's like
62%
I'm like, what's
said
going
no.
on? I'm like, I'm reading that. But once you're getting yourself into them ignoring it and you're giving the evidence to landlord and tenant board, is that you try to work with the tenant. You try to say, these are the safety issues. This is why your insurance is now at risk. These are now the steps that you need to take into providing the evidence to the landlord and tenant board for them to grant a remedy and or eviction if the tenants don't want to comply. Because you obviously have a duty and they were always held to the higher standards. Now, when you go to the landlord and tenant board, you can provide the evidence such as the lease agreements showing that the occupancy terms, your bylaw inspection report. So if bylaw was called, they're going to give you a report. You want to include that into the landlord and tenant board. Any complaints from the neighbors regarding parking to show that yes, the tenants are indeed overcrowding in this that type of unit. If you see an increase in spikes in your water or your hydro, having that detailed report of all your bills to show how it's gone up there, videos or photos of extra mattresses or furniture or damages, witness statements from the contractors or the neighbors, communicating records, letters, emails, and texts from going back and forth with the tenant, trying to tell them like, hey, you can't be doing this. The insurance, documenting, showing the higher premiums or the coverage issues, and maintenance regarding noting unusual conditions. Organizing this in a very strict timeline to the landlord and tenant board so that you're better prepared if you do have to attack this at the landlord and tenant board. Now, there's a lot to unpack there based on trying to make sure that you're very clear with the tenants, making sure you're doing your inspection, making sure you understand your policies with the insurance company. But we do have to make sure that we're encouraging landlords to not be afraid to document everything and don't be afraid to escalate it if it needs to, because you do not want that property burning down because your tenants had decided to overcrowd or you decided to try to create as much revenue and cash flow to that property as much as you can in this troubling market, that you overlook this hidden risk of being financially responsible and putting your tenants at risk as well, and the municipality coming down every landlord's neck. So that's what I have to kind of give you. My handout is definitely going to cover pretty much what I said in more detail, what you should do and how you should say it and how you can talk to the tenants when you are dealing with this type of issue, because sometimes it's just about providing that customer service to the tenants as you're trying to address a concern. So keep that in mind as you're being a landlord, that they are humans too and they may not know. So just bring it to them very gently, but very professionally.
Yeah.
How was I doing for
I,
time?
you're doing great. A lot to unpack there for sure. What I hear is a few themes. Document starts in the lease, communicate, escalate as quickly as you see fit, and make sure you're taking the appropriate steps. Because you can be on the hook for things on the liability. So lots of good things there. Just one quick question for you before we move on to Corey. Again, if you've got questions, please drop them in the Q&A, not the chat. Q&A is where we're going to be looking. But where should people go to understand the max occupancy of the unit? Like you alluded to that before, but maybe just a quick close on that before we kick it over to Corey.
It would be their city on their city website. So you're going to be able to Google a city website. Now we have like AI. So even for front lobby AI, check it out. You might be able to get the full information and the guidance to where you can say what your city year is and what the maximum occupancy is allowed for your city. So making sure you're doing it. It's pretty standard, but they keep changing it. So just make sure you're checking that out.
Amazing. Thanks for that, Kayla. And I know we do have people that are joining from across Canada. Obviously, we're going to be more Ontario focused, but please know when we talk about the landlord tenant board or local jurisdiction, just you'll have similar resources in your space. So whether your municipality or province, make sure you're looking at the appropriate resources as you go through and figure out the best course of action to take. All right, Corey, I think you had the most broad topic of the evening as far as the risks post move in. So I'm curious to hear which direction you're going to take this. So we'll kick it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Grant. And thanks everybody for spending a bit of time with us here tonight. And we know that you could be doing many different things, but you're actually coming and spending that time to learn and educate yourself here. There's a lot of experience here on the call, literally decades and decades. I was trying to add up all of our experience here on the call. It's probably like close to a whole century of experience. But having done hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of move-ins over the years, I've seen all the different pain points that can come up as a landlord. And I had some pretty good transferable skills when I came into being a landlord. I was in HR, right? So you're making decisions on people all day long, and that can be highly transferable over to real estate. But I didn't have systems out of the gates, right? And because I didn't have those systems, I got to learn through trial and error of all the biggest things that can happen that are definitely pain points. They can cost you a lot of money as a landlord. And I'm kind of curious, maybe we can pop the poll up here early on in my conversation, but I'd love to know, do people here have like systems for post move-in? Like we do all this work up front to screen and vet and do our due diligence and make the best decision with who we feel should be in our unit. And then from there, what are people doing after that? Because if you don't have systems, you're going to really struggle and it's going to cost you more money as a landlord. So take your time and vote there. I know it's going to take a couple minutes, and yes, do not do this while driving. That would not be safe. But I've been able to kind of narrow down to some of the biggest pain points for me as a landlord, the ones that cost the most, and that's going to be part of the giveaway here tonight. It's definitely a great expectations document. I've trained my in-house property manager to cover this with everybody, but that moves in, and it's really been helpful, and we can basically just pull it out whenever we need to. And if you think about your time as a landlord, I want to make this really simple, gang. In life, whenever you have a problem or a challenge, it typically comes down to a couple things. It's going to be a communication problem. And even above that, it's going to be a thinking problem. Okay. And if you don't teach your tenants how to think through being a responsible tenant while they're staying in your unit, I always like to use the example. It's almost like you're staying in a hotel. All right. But it's for like a year or 2 years or 3 years. And if you lived in a hotel, you wouldn't just start screwing things to the walls and totally changing things around, throwing things out without actually at least calling down to the front desk and seeing if that was okay. And if it wasn't okay, then, it's like bring in the maintenance person and whatever. Right. So it's so important to have those systems in place. And I know there's going to be like other people here tonight, like Danielle and Mario. They're going to talk through some of the expectations you should set with your tenants before they move in. But then what you do after you move in is really important too. So I think it's important to have a set communication way and a level of importance for things that come up as a landlord. All right. I always tell my tenants that there's 3 different levels of importance. We're going to have like urgent, like there's water coming through the ceiling. I'm seeing sparks. I don't have any hot water. I don't have any heat. That would be like a code 1. All right. And I tell the tenants like, look, that's not something you text us. That's something like pick up the phone and call the office number, call it multiple times, to make sure that gets known. Okay. Most things will fall under a category 2, which is like, we can fix it. Like, hey, something's a little bit loose, or, one of the elements on your stove is broken. We're going to put that on the repair list. And sometimes we do like to batch those repairs as well. So if we have the appliance repair person going out, they can go out and hit 3 challenges in a day. We're not going to let it build up too long, because you have to also understand that you get what you give in this whole relationship. And if you're slow to respond, they're going to be slow to respond. If you're slow to fix things, they're going to be slow to do things that you ask of them as well. And it's very important to make sure that level of communication and how to communicate is very important. I tell them, like, hey, you can message us on our messaging app. We use Buildium. All right. So I highly recommend having a platform to communicate with your tenants on, because then they're not texting your personal cell phone number. And if you ever want to hand the business over to someone else, you can just say, hey, log into the app and you take over the messaging, because I'm in Mexico or I'm wherever, and I want to make sure that the tenants are being looked after. And then the third level of communication would be the nice to haves. Okay. Like, if you want to give us like some ideas of maybe on your anniversary or sign back, these are things that we can maybe consider as a bit of a sign back bonus or whatever it might be. But these are the nice to haves. Lots of times we may not have the budget for it, but we can save up for that, and we can always put it under advisement. All right. So that's basically just having a system of communication with your tenants, which is very, very important. I mentioned the tenant experience. And at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your tenants, even though many provinces, it's a very heavy tenant like focused environment for them with all the rules and legislation, but you want to make sure that you're giving them good customer service. And it definitely helps towards referrals and the tenant doing the right thing on the way out. That's the biggest thing, right? If we can make sure that the tenants do the right thing when they're in the unit, specifically on the way out, that is our number one prerogative all the time. And it's like, leave the unit clean and empty, which sounds simple, but it's harder than you can imagine, because their head is in another place when they're ready to go rent in their next unit, right? The grass may be greener for them. They might want to move on, and then they rush, right? But if you have checklists and if you have systems for when somebody moves in, whether that's how they report damage, how they basically follow all your protocol. I've got 30 points that have been my pain points over the years, everything from, what to flush, what not to flush, how to communicate, how to take care of things when you're in the unit. Basically your unit begins and ends. If you're in a multiplex building, it's at your front door, right? So all these other things like access to storage, access to the backyard, parking, those can all be side arrangements and agreements that you make with the tenants. So I think you'll see the theme tonight that our typical standard leases, no matter what province you're in, they do not encompass everything that they should have. So Danielle's going to talk about just additional things you should have in your lease. These are all like side carts that you should have. On top of that, I've got some checklists to share here too, which really help our process. Even when our tenants give notice to move out, we immediately have like a templated email that goes out, like, this is what we need to do before you move out, right? It's just all having systems in place. And if you're not a systems person, make sure that you lean into somebody that is a systems person and see if you can see what they use on their rental properties, because you can't just fly by the seat of your pants. I remember seeing my dad grew up in a duplex, and he would literally just do handshake deals with people as they rented out the top of our house, which was a duplex. Long gone are the days where you can do handshake deals, and people don't necessarily know what it's like to always do the right thing. They need to be guided. And if you can have strong systems, and if you can have a way of working with people and a way of communicating effectively with people, it goes a long way. So one of the first ways that I like to deal with like a challenging situation is not to be messaging back and forth with people. And I let them know that when we're signing the lease. We actually spend 45 minutes to an hour going through the lease and all the additional paperwork, sometimes more, depending on how much we need to go through and all the additional agreements that we have. But I just say, look, here's a great question you can ask. If there's ever a situation where we need to bring up something that's in the paperwork, because, hey, it's like we're playing a sport, right? And there might be an in-fly rule in baseball, and we don't know what happens and we need the referees and the umpires to come in and help us navigate that. What's the best way to reach out to you? Would you mind if I actually gave you a call, or my office manager would say this, is it okay if we gave you a call and had a live conversation about this? Because, it just saves like 10, 15 messages back and forth. You'll see the importance in our voice and our communication when we do work through it. And the purpose of paperwork is to make sure all the expectations are there, and then we file it away, and we want to have a good working relationship with you. But sometimes we need to pull it out of the filing cabinet and actually have a conversation with you about it. So is that okay? Make sure you get that buy-in from them. And then it just sets you up for success more and more with your systems and things that you want to have in place with your tenants. Okay. So I've been able to avoid dodge a lot of bullets that way. Make sure you have a presence, definitely up front. We always find a reason to go, and maybe there's like a little repair or a tweak that needs to be done early on in the tenancy, and I'll just leave that so that we just want to get them moved in, make sure they're happy. We're messaging them constantly how was the first couple nights in the unit, keeping that communication open, and then we can get into the unit in the next month or so and do a repair and make sure that they're not doing crazy things in the unit. All right, so just have that presence, because if it's like, hey, landlord's away, the mice might play, right? So you got to have a presence at your property. You got to have someone doing the walkarounds. You got to have someone picking up garbage on a regular basis. I don't know if people have ever heard of the broken glass theory, but it's true. If nobody's there watching and there's already some garbage on the property, they're going to add to it. So I can't stress enough, gang, to make sure that you have systems in place when you're renting your units. I'd say more systems the better, but there's got to be that sweet spot. Like, have enough to make sure that everybody's getting along, because our 3 rules are don't do any damage, pay your rent on time, and don't interrupt the enjoyment of everybody else in the unit. All right. So if we can keep those 3 clear, that makes life a lot easier. So
Awesome.
man, it's hard to do this in like less than half of a TED Talk time. So my time is up, but looking forward to the Q&A at the end.
You did pretty well, Corey.
What's that?
You did pretty well. I was impressed.
There we go. What was the result of the poll? I wasn't even able to check here. Who's got some systems?
I think 68% said no, they didn't have a system.
Wow, you guys are going to get some gifts then at the end of the night.
Yeah. Yeah. What I really liked about what you said, we have great diversity of people on the call. Someone that's renting out their basement, some of them may have 10 or 100 units. And you talked about integrating technology when appropriate. We've seen a lot of new systems and processes that are inexpensive for landlords, but can provide a lot of solutions. And setting those expectations around timelines and communications with individuals is going to be critical. If I'm renting one house, I'm not going to have an on-site property manager or a plumber on call. Like, it's going to take me a little bit longer potentially to respond versus, if you've got a multiplex where you have people on site. So I really liked how you frame that. And I think there's a lot of good takeaways for people. Danielle, we've already talked a lot about some documentation and things, and I know the lease is something we haven't really touched on yet, but I, like everyone on this call, have lots of conversations around that and how the standard leases, which are provided in many of the provinces here, they're definitely not sufficient. So please take it away.
Oh my God. Okay, so the challenge for me tonight is going to be 10 minutes or less. All right, so on that note, I'm going to talk very fast, guys, so buckle up. Here it is, leases. First of all, I want to ask all of you guys, has anybody ever actually rented a rental unit without a proper lease in place? And so you'll see the poll pop up. Answer that, because I'm really curious to know how many of you guys are doing this without contracts. And the lease is a binding contract. So what I'm going to tell you is that the contracts, and people don't want to go around, they don't like contracts because there's a stigma around contracts, but contracts, or if you don't call them contracts, call them agreements, is what is going to protect your investment. Okay, that is a first line of defense. It's easy enough to do. It is a little bit intimidating. It's like doing math. Most people don't like it, and most people don't like contracts, but I'm going to tell you right now, embrace it because you need it. Okay. And the reason why it's so important to have them is because it's going to give you that legal protection. It's going to give clarity to the tenant. It's going to provide some financial security, okay, and some protections to your property. And it's really going to set the standard as to how the relationship with your tenant is going to go. When you show up with a contract, they see that you're professional, and they're going to start acting professional back. So however way you show up, they're going to show up. And if you have less desirable tenants, they're likely not going to want to have you as a landlord because they see that you have yourself together and that you're probably going to hold them accountable. And so they're going to move on. So it's a good way to vet out some less desirable tenants as well. So you really want to set the bar to have great tenants. Now, with the residential, the Ontario Standard Lease Agreement that we have, the OSLA, a lot of people think that that's just sufficient enough, and it's not. And there's a bunch of reasons why it's not sufficient. Number one is because it's to protect the tenant, okay? It's just the Ontario government saw that there were so many different leases all over the place that landlords are putting in clauses that weren't enforceable, that weren't legal, and so they wanted to standardize it, make it easy for tenants to understand. And there really is just a bare bones lease, and you really want to beef it up so that you're actually protecting yourself, which is the whole point of having an agreement, okay? And so I see the poll numbers here showing up. Interestingly enough, there's still 14% of you who said that you've rented a unit without a written lease agreement. I'd be curious as a follow-up if you've ever had any problems because I know, Kayla, right? I'm like, what? No, that's gotta be like zero, guys, zero. Zero, I'm telling you, because if you haven't had a problem yet, it will come and it will hurt. It will hurt very much, and you don't want that to happen, okay? The reason why the OSLA, the Ontario Standard Lease Agreement, or equivalent in your province, other provinces have this as well, or even just one from your realtor. Like, even if it's not mandated by your province, it may, all realtors typically, they have a lease agreement, and so you might be using that. You might have downloaded off the internet. You might have had a rental agent who's a realtor who's, put the tenants in place for you and use that. It's not enough, guys. It's not enough. It's a minimum compliance document, doesn't cover like landlord specific risks. There's limited rules. You don't have all of these extra clauses that Kayla talked about, overcrowding. There's no clauses there for what the expectations are that you're going to come and check on the unit every 3 months. And I tell that to my tenants when I'm renting out. I'm like, hey, you know what? I come and do a site visit every 3 months, whether I actually show up or not, which I try to, but typically like I absolutely do every 6 months, but every 3 months is what I tell them. Again, it's going to vet out those tenants that are maybe a little bit less desirable, right? But if you don't, the gaps in the standard lease agreements are just so big for us. It's a huge risk not to. So what you want to do is you want to have a bunch of clauses included in your rental agreement, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to create an addendum. You're going to go to a paralegal. You're going to talk to people who are doing this all the time and know what clauses to have in place. And you're going to say, hey, what clauses do I need to put as an addendum and attach it to this rental agreement? Because standard rental agreement is just going to have terms, start date, end date, what the monthly rent is. There's really not much beyond that, okay? So here are some things that you're going to want to include, okay? Kayla already talked about it. I saw as well like a clause for overcrowding, okay? This will help you with people bringing in roommates and just having people come in and you have no control over who's in your unit, okay? It will also help you avoid having roommates turn into tenants that you didn't realize through implied consent, which is maybe you're taking the roommate is giving you the rent that day, rather than the actual person who's on the lease, and you can actually not wanting to make them into a tenant, and that can happen. So there's like risks involved with not having these clauses, okay, guys? Utility and service payments. Sometimes we're in like duplexing, triplexing world now. Sometimes we're going to be sharing utilities. What does that look like? Sometimes there's complex structures. You're going to put that in your additional clauses. Maintenance and repairs. Who's responsible for what? What are the expectations? Just like what Corey said, like you want to talk about, who's going to pick up the garbage? Who's going to do this and that? You're going to put that in there. Okay. Smoking, vaping. Smoking is a big one. Vaping, cannabis, okay, huge. We got EV cars coming in. Are they allowed to plug in, right? If they do AC units in the windows, like those, if we're paying the hydros landlords, that's going to increase our utility bill exponentially. Having growing pot plants. There's like these, I don't know much about this, so forgive me for all you cannabis lovers. I don't know this stuff. So, but I have seen it. Kayla, you're laughing at me. I have seen it. Like there's these like, I don't know, growth things like a interior greenhouse that you can have. And that can cause mold in your property. That's going to increase utility bills. Who's eating that cost? Who's going to pay for those damages caused by doing that? You need clauses, guys, in order to protect that. And do what Corey says, go and walk into those. How did I see that greenhouse? Because I walked into my unit and I saw it and I went, wait a minute, no, we can't have that. I had a clause for it and get rid of it, or you can move out, either or, it's your choice, right? And so it gives you that sense of that, not that sense, it gives you some control over what happens in your unit, which we already have limited control. So we do have to do it legally. We have to do it by law. We can't just walk in and say, I don't like you. I don't like what you're doing. You have to get out. And so we have to make sure we're just a little bit smarter and doing it the right way. Gosh, time is going by so fast. Grant's going to cut me off anytime. I know, right, Kayla? What else? What else? What other clauses you guys need to write down? Okay. Entry and inspection rights. Let them know that you have a right to come in and this is how it works. You're going to have a clause for that. Pest control, appliance use, again, like I said, EV cars, guest and occupancy rules, and that's coming to the overcrowding. And, you know, the other thing is too, and I know Mario's going to talk about insurance, and I'm going to talk about this for a minute. It is so critical that you put it in your lease agreement that the tenant has to get insurance. And I'm not going to dive deep in this, but have a clause in your addendum for this. Okay. It is so, so important. And so the other thing is too, you can put in there is that you're going to be doing some credit bureau reporting, which Grant is going to talk about. And that is also so very important. It helps deter those less savory tenants. They're just going to go away because if they know that they don't pay on time, they're not going to want you as a landlord, right? And so it's really important to have all of these clauses and then some, and I've got a document. You guys are going to love it. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. It only touches on the most important clauses, guys, but it is going to give you a lot to think about. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Here's your next steps. You're going to hire a paralegal who deals with tenant and landlord issues. And then you're going to have them draft you a proper lease agreement. And you're not going to be shy at how long the lease is. I think my lease is like 37 pages long. And I have something like 86 clauses. Okay. If you don't like it, that's okay. Go find another rental unit. I'll find another tenant. It's as simple as that. I'm not going to compromise on my rental unit and taking care of my rental unit and my level of professionalism to do anybody a favor and put my investment at risk. And that's what it boils down to. Okay. And so if you have system like the lease agreement itself, building it out can be a little bit tedious. But every time I have an issue that happens, I'm like, what do I need in there? I mean, I've got water beds, which nobody has water beds anymore, but like I got because think about this, right? Somebody's going to have a water bed one day. There's going to be a hole and it's going to cause damage. And if it's not in there, I know, right? I used to have one who didn't have a water bed. Come on. It was awesome. I was like 12 years old. It was amazing. Anyhow, but when you have a water bed, and by the way, that water bed was in a rental. My mom and I were renting. And so if I pierced that waterbed and it leaked out overnight and caused damage, who's paying for that? Wouldn't have been us because we didn't have the proper clause in place, or the landlord didn't. It would have been the landlord's insurance. So anyway, you don't want that, guys. I think that's it for me and that's my time. But Grant.
That's pretty good. Yeah, pretty close. Like bang on. I'm going to remember no water beds. My parents definitely had a water bed, and I was highly jealous. But you know, I like how things are kind of flowing together. You know, you're talking about documentation and talking about hiring a paralegal, which I know comes up a lot of people's like, oh, I don't want to spend the money, or this seems like, do it. It is worth the money. There's a reason why we open these conversations saying hire the appropriate legal advice. And the reality is, as you do it longer and longer, you get smarter. And the first time you do it will be the most expensive, obviously takes the most. And then there's going to be slight tweaks to it. So use the professional help out there. A few $100 or the time and effort spent is going to be well worth it. So
okay, but
thanks.
Hang on a second, Grant, because you said something. I'm going to tell you right now. We're not spending money on these lease agreements. Okay, guys, we're investing. Okay, we're investing into our property. That is an investment. It's an insurance policy and protecting your property. This is where I get really upset because, and I tell our students this all the time, you're not spending money. It's not an expense. Like you could look at it that way, but you got to shift your mindset. It's not an expense, it's an investment, which by the way, you spend on it or you invest in it one time. Okay, it is painful. You go through it and get it drafted. You're going to review it, have conversations back and forth. But then once you have it drafted, then you have it drafted for the tenancy that you're wanting to do right now, but then all subsequent tenancies. My lease agreement, I had it once, done up once, and then now if I need a clause, I just have to call my paralegal for one clause. It's so super easy, and then I just plug it in, right? And that's it. So it's really like you're not spending money, guys. Change how you're thinking about this. It's an insurance policy.
Well, good segue.
Touched a nerve.
Speaking about insurance, Mario, you've been sitting so quiet and patiently here. Let's talk about something that most people don't want to talk about. Besides hiring paralegals, like this is another aspect that most people don't really want to deal with and dive deep into, but yet is super important. So love for you to share your thoughts on this, please.
The pressure is on, and Danielle, thank you so much for not stealing my thunder when the insurance topic came up. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge presenting something as well as the last three presenters, but I'm going to give it a quick shot. I also jotted down some notes because I feel each of you guys said three things that were very important, and I'm going to relate it to the topic which I'm going to be discussing, which is insurance. So first and foremost, I decided to talk about insurance because since I am a real estate agent, I own a brokerage, I often see a lot of landlords kind of taking that step of the landlord and tenant process and kind of putting it in the back burner when it could be a very, very costly mistake. I noticed that Corey he had posted something on the board saying how he had a total loss on a triplex due to a fire, right? So there's lots of things that can happen, and this is why insurance is very important. So the moment that you go ahead and you rent out your property basically turns into an investment. It's a business. And standard homeowners insurance usually does not cover any rental activity. So it can leave a landlord really exposed, and it could cause a very big problem. So some of the top risks without proper coverage, you could be denied a claim for fire, water damage, any tenant accidents. There could be personal liability if someone is injured on your property. This is a very big one. Let's say the tenant has somebody that comes over and they fall down the stairs. Well, guess what? Now that guest of the tenant, if the tenant doesn't have insurance, they're suing the homeowner. There's also, for example, if there's something catastrophic that happens within the rental property, if you have tenant's insurance, the insurance will actually pay you for any loss of rent. To me, this is one of the biggest things and why it's important, because let's say your property would take 6 months to a year, which I've had a lot of clients where their property's been inhabitable for a year. Now you're losing 1 year of rent. So if your property's not paid off in cash, guess what? You're still making monthly payments to the mortgage every single month, which obviously, unless you have very deep pockets, it's going to be kind of difficult, right? So there's going to be a lot of out-of-pocket costs, lawsuits, legal fees. These are all things that insurance will definitely help you. So one thing that I did want to kind of point out is when issues happen, Kayla had mentioned, document everything. So I want to really stress that. I think it's extremely important, and you want to document any type of incidents that happen. I know it's not relating to insurance, but let's say when a tenant is late on their payments or not paying, just you want to make sure you're documenting everything, because when it comes time to, let's say, go to an adjudicator or go to landlord and tenant board court, the first thing that they're going to ask you is, where is your documentation? If you don't have your ducks in a row, guess what? It's going to make your claim that much more difficult to win. So I want to talk about the differences between, let's say, a homeowner's policy versus a landlord's policy. With a homeowner's policy, if you live there, you're covered. If you rent it out, nothing's covered. If you have a landlord's policy, for example, it would cover the structure of the house. The tenant's policy for the tenant would obviously cover their their things, like let's say their furniture, their clothes, jewelry, whatever they may have. And the liability aspect is something that's very important. Getting back to, once again, if somebody falls in their property or one of them unfortunately passes away because, let's say, I don't know, they fell in the house or something catastrophic happened, you obviously would have some form of protection, right? To me, the liability aspect is probably the biggest reason why you want to have insurance. If I can give anybody a little bit of a tip, when you actually go ahead and get insurance, make sure that you ask the tenant to get a $2 million liability policy at a minimum. I know a lot of people still do 1 million. I don't really think nowadays $1 million of insurance is enough coverage. So obviously this is something that you can try to achieve. Something that I also want to talk about, and I want to bring up Corey. He mentioned systems, and basically what you do after the fact is extremely important. So one of the things that I do feel is that I see it oftentimes at the beginning of a lease, a landlord will ask for insurance, the tenant will give the insurance. So one of two things happen. First and foremost, the landlord actually doesn't verify if that policy is really legitimate. There is a lot of fraud going on. A lot of people are making fake insurance binders. I've seen them personally. So you want to definitely double check that the insurance policy is active and valid. And getting to Corey's point, down the line, whether it be 3 months, 6 months, at the time of renewal, you want to make sure that that policy is still active. Is the tenant paying for that policy? Did the tenant cancel it? As you know, a lot of the times tenants, they might have a financial crunch. 6 months down the road, they don't have as much expendable income. They'll cancel the insurance just to save the 40 or 50 bucks a month, right? So you definitely want to keep up to date to make sure that the tenant is actually keeping the policy active. So I think it's extremely important. And also from the Ontario standard lease, tenants insurance is something that, there needs to be clarity. Going back to now what Danielle said, make sure it's in the contract. You want to take adequate time explaining to the tenant. And I feel that that communication is very important, where you sit down with the tenant and you're kind of explaining like, look, this is the reason why you need to have insurance. A lot of the times, tenants, they feel that they don't need insurance and they don't understand the liability portion of it. But at the same time, if you take your time to explain, hey, guess what? This is very important because a policy is only going to cost you $400 or $500 a year. But what you are getting for that policy is a lot of protection should something unforeseen happen.
Speaking of unforeseen things that happen, wow. That's
Come on, I was into that.
yeah.
So good. Come on now.
Well,
You literally
maybe
overheated.
maybe while we wait
Here
for
he
him
is.
to come back.
Yeah.
I'm back. I'm back.
Oh, there he is.
Gotcha.
Right on.
Back. Perfect time to have an internet outage right in the middle of your presentation. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we
I
got you.
can't hear you guys.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
so
here.
sorry, guys. I can't hear you.
Keep testing. 1, 2, 3.
There we go. Now I can
There we
hear
go.
you. Wonderful. I apologize for everybody tuning in and thank you for sticking with me. So going forward, I just think that it's something that a lot of the times landlords don't really focus on the insurance aspect of it. It's something that's extremely serious and it needs to be taken very seriously. And ultimately, it's your unit. If something happens, the insurance policy at any point, the insurance policy can at any point in time, they can say to you, well, there's an accident that happened. We're not covering you. You're the owner of the property. You're liable. Ultimately, the responsibility falls on you. So you need to get your ducks in a row right at the beginning of the lease, which is why I feel that Danielle's point of having a big checklist and writing your contract in a specific way will go a really long way to protecting yourself and your family. And ultimately, it's an investment. Just like Danielle said, you're investing a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort, and ultimately you want to protect that investment. And something as simple as doing the right thing, like getting a proper insurance policy at the beginning of the lease, will go a long way. So overall, I've noticed that a lot of landlords, they actually don't switch their policy from a homeowner's policy to a tenant's policy. Sometimes they have a home and they decide to go ahead and rent it out, but they keep the policy the same, thinking that the landlord's policy is actually going to be more expensive, when in fact, a landlord's policy is actually cheaper than a tenant's policy in many cases. And obviously, it's going to give you that added protection as well. So you want to do two things as a landlord. You want to make sure that your policy is a landlord's policy, and also you want to make sure that your tenant has a valid tenant's policy. Like I said, the little suggestion, apart from them covering their personal items, you want to make sure there's a $2 million liability clause in there, just to make sure if there's any unforeseen accidents, you're covered, right? So that's my spiel, and I hope I didn't take 10 minutes.
That was good. You dropped off, came back, and I've got you at 9 minutes and 18 seconds.
Wow.
So
Score.
I'm going to actually give a follow-up. I loved how you talked about checking in, verifying before people move in. I find that's often missed. Like, people will think, ask for renewal within a year. Can you maybe share some steps around how you would actually go to validate that insurance that, it has been bonded?
Yes. So personally, one of the things that I've done in many cases, I've actually contacted the insurance broker directly. I've contacted the insurance company directly. You want to make sure that policy is valid. Like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, there's a lot of fraud going on. There's a lot of fraudulent documents. A lot of people are getting extremely savvy with Photoshop and AI, and there's a lot of things that look very, very real, from job letters to employment letters. Like I said, the insurance binders are something that I've seen forged a lot more often over the last 6 months to a year. So these are things that you kind of want to make sure that they're valid. But more importantly, getting back to what Corey said, which I feel is extremely important, what you do after the fact is extremely important. So you'll want to kind of I usually do it every 6 months. And at the time of renewal, I'll also make sure that insurance policy is still valid, just to avoid any unforeseen problems. And I have my poll question, which I didn't talk about at the beginning, but I wanted to ask everybody if they still felt that owning a rental property was still a valid investment in 2025. So this is something that a lot of people feel it's not necessarily because there's no money in it. It's more than anything because of the large added risk of tenants basically dictating the terms for landlords, right? So I'm always curious to hear the public's perception, if they really think that owning a rental property is still worth it. So
Good question. We hear a lot around people kind of moving out of different geographies, not owning the property, shifting around. But don't worry, if you say you don't feel like it's worthwhile, we're not going to kick you off the webinar or anything like that. Still want you to kick around, and
they're not getting the takeaways. That's it. Nothing for them.
That's right. Yeah, they're just off the references at the end. That's good. You talked about a lot of good things, and it ties in a lot to what I'm going to talk about as far as disappearing rental data. I mean, it's no surprise to anybody. You've seen a huge increase in fraud, and you've seen delays at local tenancy branch. You see everything from screening challenges to having problems getting individuals out that stop paying their rent. And so what I want to talk a little bit about is the challenges when you're looking to find a tenant that moves into your property. Like, one of the challenges is we're not even talking about evictions or damages or some of those major things that can actually end up in the court system. There's often no way to verify whether someone has actually paid the rent or not. And so if I'm renting a property and I just decide not to pay rent, I don't actually get to the point of being evicted. Typically, no landlord or no other individual knows that. And that poses a serious challenge, especially when you look in Canada that a majority of the housing is still provided by small independent housing providers. We all alluded to this on our conversations. When your tenant doesn't pay your rent, that puts you at risk because you have to pay your mortgage. There's still lenders. And within the housing space, there is not the protections that exist with other creditors in the space until recently. So this comes up in a couple ways. One, we're talking about the ability to report rental data to the credit bureaus. And why that matters is that when rental data is on the credit bureaus, it's verified as being accurate. It's reported by the housing provider that actually rented to that individual. And now it's available not just to future housing providers, but it has an immediate financial impact on that tenant. which changes the behavior, as well as it provides that financial data to additional creditors. So auto loans, mortgages in the future, as well as things like credit cards. So why this actually matters within the greater ecosystem? One, it impacts the tenants. We've most likely everyone on the call has been young at some point in time and has also been a renter. So we know what it's like to be either new to credit, new to country, trying to build up your credit to purchase your first home, get a good rate on your auto loans, those sort of things. And reporting the rental data to the credit bureaus is really important because it helps provide financial well-being for those great tenants, which a vast majority of them are. They pay their rent on time every month, just like when we pay our mortgage. That should have a positive financial well-being. And so when you report that rental data, it helps the tenants on that side. Alternatively, for those individuals that don't pay their rent, there should be consequences. You know, we started Front Lobby because we believe in transparency and accountability, and we want to drive that home within the housing space. We just didn't feel like that was there. And so that's why we created the ability to report that rental data to that space. You'll hear a lot when you're dealing with the LTB in Ontario. It's definitely one of the more challenging ones as far as delays and dealing with challenges getting someone evicted or recovering debt. And so the ability to report that data near immediately to the credit bureaus really helps. So from your standpoint as a housing provider, Danielle alluded to this earlier, it actually really starts with screening. So when you put some clauses in there that allude to you reporting rental data to the credit bureaus, it allows you to have a conversation with any prospective tenant. First, helps individuals that are less likely to reach out, that are less likely to pay their rent. They just won't reach out in the first place. They'll move on and rent someplace else. When you're actually speaking with the individual, just have the conversation. You know, Kayla, I'm going to report rental data to the credit bureaus. When you pay on time, you get the choice that can help benefit you. If you don't pay rent, then that gets reported. And the beauty of that from a protection for you as a housing provider is they can choose whether they benefit from having their on-time payments reported, but consent is never required to report those debts. That means that even if they don't sign our clauses, even if you have a former tenant that owes you a debt or a current tenant that owes a debt, you can still report that unpaid rent and utilities that are outlined in the lease. Critical to have a documented lease so you can actually report the rental data. You can report that without the tenant's consent. And this is critical because it provides you that protection that creditors should have. It allows that debt to hit their credit file within the month. It provides immediate pressure for them to make sure that you're getting paid on time. And what we see is it significantly reduces those late payments and delinquencies. Makes you're providing housing a lot more sustainable, especially for the smaller independents, and it provides those tenants with that well-being. And what this ends up doing is it creates a verified ecosystem so you can actually see the rental data of what an individual did. When you're looking at a tenant, the best predictor of whether they're going to pay their rent is how they've paid their rent in the past. And so by having the data on the credit files alongside their credit cards, maybe their auto loans, all these other things, you're able to make the best assessment around whether or not this is a person that you want to turn over your hundreds of thousands of dollars or million plus asset to pay rent on for the near future. And so reporting that rental data is critical within this housing space because there's so many different individuals, large institutions, small housing providers that are renting out these assets, continue to provide housing, and creating this accountability and transparency around the rental data so you can assess your risk, you can have the benefits of the protection of the debts and on-time payments going to the credit bureaus. And so those great tenants can benefit from paying their largest expense each month is critical and creating the ecosystem around some sustainability in housing with protections for all. So recognize when we're talking about debts and rental payments, there's a little bit of complexity to that. So if you have questions around reporting and what actually works best, probably best option out of this, reach out to us, support@frontlobby.com. We can have one of our team members contact you, set up a time to talk through your specific situation, and we can go through that. Mario, it looks like you had a question. I think you're on mute, actually. Mario, if you can hear me, we can't actually hear you. You might need to reconnect your sound. Sorry.
You're taking away an Italian's voice. What are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It looks like it's probably on your computer side because you're not muted. So maybe if you want to leave and rejoin, and we we can get you back in the Q&A section. So I'd love to hear your thoughts here. Kind of, man, he's just leaving us on pins and needles here. So anyways, we'll try and keep the drama low. We'll move on to the Q&A section. If you have something you want our team to get to, please, again, drop it into Q&A. Not sure we'll have time to get to everything, but that's where I'm going to be reading from. So if you want it answered, drop it in there. Sorry, I'm going to start with the first one here. Kayla, it looks like it's for you. It says, I thought my tenant had the right to have roommates. Can I stop them?
No. We have to allow them to have roommates. At the same time, we also have to be careful on the fact of overcrowding. So the crowding fact of lots of people and they're not related, that's where you're going to do a fine line. Now, when it comes down to roommates, it all depends. Like, yeah, they can have a roommate, but you start accepting money from that roommate, they could become your tenant. So be very, very careful on how we are treating our roommates, and even down to them giving you maintenance concerns or requests. I always like to just take it from the tenant, not the roommates.
Yeah.
Amazing. Mario, welcome back.
Can you hear me now?
We got you.
Third time's the charm. Let's go. So no, Grant, you were mentioning a whole slew of great things that Front Lobby does, which I agree with everything. I'm not sure if you covered this, but one of the things that I feel is so important about that rent reporting is that when you're initially discussing that lease with the tenant and you let them know, hey, I work with a company called Front Lobby, and I actually do rent reporting. I feel that right at the beginning, before you even got them to sign the lease, it's almost like you can start weeding out the bad tenants, because the tenants that know they may do something fishy, or they're going to go ahead and pay you late. They don't want their credits ruined. So I found that a lot of the times when you let them know that this is what you do, all of a sudden, they're not interested in your place anymore. They're looking, they found something else in a different area, or they no longer want to lease. You know what I mean? So I think it's something really important to have from a landlord standpoint that will kind of be a little bit of a barrier for a lot of tenants to kind of scare them away. And that's what you want. And I feel that a lot of landlords, they're kind of quick to get a tenant in their unit because they don't want to have the unit unoccupied for a month, right? But like Danielle said, this is an investment. You know what I mean? You need to invest here, and you might have a unit empty for 1 or 2 months. But once you get a tenant in there, it's very difficult to get them out. So you need to invest that proper time and effort to make sure that you get somebody proper in the unit.
Can I just jump in there, Grant, real quick?
Please.
Yeah, so different provinces, because we're across Canada tonight, and we even have some people down the States I saw. So I just want to say it's really important that you understand the laws where your property is at, because those are the laws that are going to govern that rental property. And if you're in provinces like Alberta, Saskatchewan, they're more landlord friendly than they are tenant friendly. If you're in Ontario or you're in BC, it's more tenant friendly. So it is hard to get them out, like Mario was saying. But if you're in the other side, like in Alberta, it's a lot easier to get them out. So it's really important to know and understand the laws where you're at. And then that will help guide you in setting up the systems and processes that you want to follow when you're doing your landlording.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And I mean, we obviously can't touch on everything, but a lot of stuff that's been talked about tonight actually happens in parallel with your local laws. You know, talking about hiring a paralegal that can help you understand your lease to set you up for success. When you're looking with deal with insurance, you've got brokers and people to deal with that can tie back to your lease. When you're looking at reporting debts for current and former tenants, this often happens in parallel with you pursuing it with your local tenancy branch and going through the jurisdictions and the courts. And we just can't dive deep into the legal system, but you know, that's often something that comes up on these calls. You know, those, and that is an area where you likely need some legal or professional help on that. But let's keep jumping through the questions here. I love the dialogue. This one's a bit odd. Does anyone have any strategies to deal with people smoking in the unit when the lease doesn't allow for it? They have denied the smoke, but I can smell it out their window. Kayla, go for it.
You're doing the inspection. look inside of the windows. If you can kind of see that yellow residue off of the windows or the walls, documentation of that, and making sure that everyone else in the rental property is not a smoker and have something in writing from them stating that I'm a non-smoker, I do not smoke inside. And then you can kind of build that case to say, what you're saying to me is a lie, right? So I think it's all about that overall evidence that you're bringing to the landlord and tenant board, and also look at your city bylaw, because there was different bylaws that have been put through regarding smoking in units where it is conjoined to other rental units. So you might be able to utilize that in your evidence when you bring it to the landlord and tenant board, if that helps. It's hard to do. Like, it's really hard to do, but if you can kind of get that residue and you see the cigarette packs and you know that the person smokes, but they haven't went outside in a very long time, chances are they're smoking inside. And you can walk in and you can bring a witness with you, and having that witness indicate that they went into that property in that unit, and they can definitely smell the residue of cigarettes, especially for a non-smoker. They are going to be your secret weapon.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, again, I was going to say that about a witness, because a lot of times they'll come in because they smoke in cars. They smoke in cars. They'll walk into their unit with the cigarette. And so you're going to have it's going to be a lot more at the board level. If you got to challenge it, it's going to be a lot more enforceable. It's going to be easier for the adjudicator to go in your favor if you have that witness. So if they say they can smell it, they saw it, and if they say, here's a big one too, it's like, it's interrupting the peaceful and quiet enjoyment of my unit, because the scent is going, especially for cannabis guys, because the scent is going into their unit. So that's really going to make it easier for you to have that in court, for sure. Yeah.
Sorry, we're going on smoking. It's a very big thing for me right now. So I want to make sure that people understand, when you're going into like getting the evidence for the smoking, if you do have someone in the building that hasn't they're allergic to it, they are going to be that person that you need to bring in person to the landlord and tenant board. Don't even bring the paperwork that they're going to sign saying that they're allergic to it and the medical records or whatever. You're also going to bring them to the landlord and tenant board with you. No one should be having to live in a rental property when there's tenants smoking like that. And this is why we're landlords, trying to teach you how to be good landlords, because your job is not to, attack tenants on what they're doing, what they're not doing. It's about protecting the other tenants that are in your property as well.
Especially if there's a shared air system. I mean, that air is just getting cycled throughout the building, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this actually ties in nicely to the next question. It says an agreement is just something in writing. If the tenant doesn't pay rent or does something that is not allowed in the agreement, what can I do about it? It's time consuming and costly to go through legal process. So should I just bite the bullet and hope for the rest? I'll open this up and then definitely turn it over to the group. I mean, hopefully what you've heard through the evening is a lot of it is about being proactive. You're not able to solve for everything. We talked a lot about communication, setting up processes, using the tools available like rent reporting, insurance, different tools to help you manage your properties, as well as knowing the laws and when you need help. So whether that is professional help or going through the justice system. But I definitely hear this feedback a lot from people where they feel like everything is stacked against them and that it almost gets overwhelming. So maybe throw it out to the group to see if there's anything you want to add or share around this comment.
Corey, it looks like you wanted to go. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite quotes is you permit what you promote, right? So if you're okay with that, then the tenant, it's like sort of like give them an inch, they'll take a mile. And it is your property. It's probably, these are going to be the biggest investments we likely make in our lifetime. So, and you have a lot of the things we're talking about tonight are totally enforceable. And, if you have that presence, if you let the tenants know that you're not okay with this, it needs to be rectified, it needs to be changed, eventually they're going to go probably find another place, right? So, or you can take it to a hearing and let it be, have the discussion in front of adjudicator. So, but yeah, build your case and document everything for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that an agreement, guys, is not to win in court. And I think that's where a lot of people have a misconception. They're like, oh, I'm gonna, you want to weigh it in your favor and you want to, so that you can win if you have to go to court. That's not, listen, that is not how I look at my contracts. That is not how I look at my agreements. It is a deterrent from going to court. Okay. Because a well-written contract, now you can sit down with the tenant and have a proper conversation. And some tenants, just can't reason with. But for the majority, you can reason with people and say, hey, look, this is what was on our agreement. If you want to go, and this is what we're getting a lot in Ontario, probably the same in BC, where it's like, oh, I know my rights. I can go to court. I can have my day in court. Yeah, sure you can. And this question says here, if the tenant doesn't pay rent or do something that's not allowed in the agreement, but if they don't pay rent, this is what I tell them. I go, listen, you can have your day in court for sure, and you cannot pay rent until we go to court, but rent is not something you can get away from, no different than I can't get away from my mortgage. You don't get to live for free. That is not how things operate in this country. So if you want to defer your rent until we get to court, then that's fine, but then I'm going to get a judgment, which is now going to allow me to go and seize your wages afterwards. And if you think it's hard to pay rent now, it's going to be a lot harder to pay later when you're getting half your pay. And so then they're going to start they're going to like pay attention and go, oh, what are you talking about? And so you say, yeah, if you want to roll the dice, but I'm telling you, rent is deferred. It is not, you don't get to live for free. It doesn't work that way. And so same with doing other things. It's like, if you want your day in court, that's fine. But if I win, guess what? You get to move out in 30 days. And then it's going to be a lot harder for you to find a rental property. You're going to have to come up with the money that you probably don't have saved right now. And so like, you just make it so that it's a very painful process for them, to encourage them to work with you. And you say, look, you're behind 2 months of rent. If you leave now, I'll wash my hands. I won't chase you. We'll call it a day. I'll give you, 60 days to do that. And then, and then you can negotiate with them a little bit. So, but the lease agreement or any agreement for anything, not just like partnership, any agreement, it's just a deterrent. It's to avoid going to court. Things are laid out clearly so people know when they're in breach, and they know when it's not going to work in their favor. So then it makes it easier for you to talk to them.
Yeah. All right, let's go a little bit more rapid fire on these next couple. Mario, for you, should the landlord be listed as named insured on the tenant's insurance?
To be very honest with you, I normally don't require it. You know what I mean? There has been in some occasions where some of my clients have asked me and they've said, should I go, like the tenant asked me if they can give my name to the insurance company. And I said, absolutely. Do you have a valid policy, a landlord's policy? Yes, I do. You have no issues. I said, your landlord's policy is not going to cover the liability of the tenant, nor is it going to cover the personal contents of the tenant. Your landlord's insurance is going to cover your dwelling liability as well. And everybody, that's kind of why also your tenant's insurance and your landlord's insurance, it's kind of like, let's say if you have a homeowner's policy, it's covering everything. Your contents, it's covering liability, it's covering the dwelling. So when you have landlord's insurance, it's basically covering half and the tenant's portion is covering the other half. That's why it's cheaper, right? But definitely, if you have the opportunity to go on the tenant's policy, I personally would if you have the chance.
Awesome. And somewhat related question, they were asking about, they contacted the tenant's insurance company to see if it was active or not, and they wouldn't provide the information. Have you come across that, or do you have any tips or tricks how to get around that?
Yes, I have. So that actually happened to me about 3 months ago. And basically I said, listen, they're not giving me the information. I need you to call the insurance company and I need to be on three-way. Very simple. Kayla?
Yeah.
Give them a written notice that they need to give it to you. And if not, give them an N5 and they have 7 days to comply. And remember, this is personal advice, not legal advice.
I love it.
I love it. All right. Is there a service to check on prospective tenants on their payment history to previous landlords? Well, a few things I'd say on that. One, search all publicly available documents. So, search on Canly and to see if there's past eviction notices or things around that. Do your credit checks. If the rental data has been reported through Front Lobby, it will be on their credit file, as well as you can search Landlord Credit Bureau through Front Lobby as well. So you can get that verified tenancy record, including the contact details of the housing provider that reported. So a lot of different things. We're not going to dive too deep on screening, but Front Lobby is a great place to start, as well as looking at public databases like Canly. Next one here is, what should I do if a tenant in a relatively new apartment is claiming excessive damage, most of which appear to be caused intentionally as an excuse to avoid paying rent or to demand a rent reduction?
It is really, really important, guys, that you document when you're okay. I wish I had a poll for this. Who actually does a video recording when they're signing the lease agreement and giving the keys? So I do it when I hand over the keys, guys. And I record. And while I'm recording, here's a little tip. While you're recording, say, hey, this is Danielle. I'm at, 123 Main Street. And just doing the tenant walkthrough for the move-in. And today's date is, and I'm recording because I'm on document. I'm recording and I go, oh, what's today's date again? I forget. And now I kind of look at my tenant. So I get them on camera and I get them to say the date. So they can never dispute that they weren't there, that wasn't them, and that was not the condition of the property when they moved in. When you have a clause, the reason why I jumped in here, when you have a clause for negligence and that they're going to be responsible for it, then you can hold them to that. But you need to document the condition of the unit. And then if there's multiple appliances that are breaking and the appliances look good and are in good working order when they moved in, and they're relatively new, then you can absolutely take them to the LTB or the corresponding court in your province and hold them accountable for that.
Danielle, that's a really great tip. I actually, what I do is I do that same little walkthrough. I actually don't get the client to say the date. I'm going to start doing that from now on. But I actually, after the walkthrough is done, I have a paper that I make them sign where they're basically I, the tenant, and I fill in their name, of course. I'm acknowledging that I've done a walkthrough. The landlord has recorded it on video, and the landlord has actually documented pictures, which I also have received a copy of, and I am admitting or acknowledging that there's no damage, just to kind of sum it up. So, but I'm going to use your tip because it's a really good tip.
I actually have a 7-page document that they sign, and like for every anyway, I can show you what that is, but like where the condition of each thing in each room is actually documented as well as the video recording. And you should also have a clause that they have to be there in person for the walk in and walk out, and put that in the lease agreement that gets signed before you actually do the move in. I actually had a tenant that didn't want to be there at the move-in. I said, then you're not getting your key today. You're not getting it until we meet. They're like, oh, but we booked the truck today. Well, then let's meet at the property. Like, I booked it, so I've got it in my calendar. So yeah, really important.
I think as landlords, we oftentimes, not we, but like just landlords in general, they kind of, let's say, okay, they didn't pay me today, they're going to pay me tomorrow, and we kind of let it slide. Unfortunately, for everybody that's watching this, you cannot give any chances. Everything has to be by the book, even from the standpoint of giving a notice. Sending a text message is oftentimes not considered a notice. You have to give notices in a proper way. There is a way to do everything. Getting back to what Danielle said earlier, you need to invest in understanding the proper processes on the whole thing, because if you don't, it's an issue.
Write this down, guys. A notice gets noticed. A notice gets noticed. And truthfully, when you do that and you do it consistently on the second day of the month, they don't pay rent on the first, give them a notice on the second, say, look, guys, it's just procedure. I know you're going to get me the rent, and you can be really nice about it. But then if they see that you're like, how you show up is how they're going to show up, right? Write that down. How you show up is how they're going to show up. And don't deviate from that, guys. We do get complacent. I have, and I've paid for it. Believe me, I have. We're not perfect. We're human.
Didn't Corey say that line? Did you steal his line?
We hang out together way too much.
I think they work together a little
I knew
bit.
it.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's so important, gang. Like the power of your cell phone, like do what Danielle's talking about. Like literally document it and just say, look, this might take 10 minutes or whatever, but we need a snapshot in time, right? I was literally doing this 15, 20 years ago with a camcorder, like just recording things, because it's just, I literally had someone put a shrine up on the wall with like 30 pictures, like nails on, like with every picture they wanted to hang. I'm like, this is never happening again. I'm just going to videotape everything, right? And it's so if they're trying to claim all this damage, it's like, okay, well, you have the Google folder or the Dropbox folder of all the videos and pictures when you moved in, right? It'd be interesting to compare that information with the information that we have today. It's just,
Corey, something that you said earlier, which I loved in your presentation, you said, go to the property check. that's something that I often do. So I'll go ahead every 3 or 4 months, I'll drive by one of my properties, and let's say I'll email the tenant or I'll send them a text and I'll just say, hey, just wanted to let you know I passed by the house today. Everything looks great outside. Thank you so much for keeping everything in a nice and good in good order. And at that point, they're happy because it's almost like you're giving them a pat on the back. They're very motivated with the whole situation. And guess what? They also know indirectly, hey, this guy's checking, so I better maintain everything properly, or he's going to know about it, right? So I definitely think being on top and documenting things and kind of making those little touches are little steps to preventing problems.
They are. I do the videos. You're driving by, but when I do my walkthroughs, and like I said, I do them at least twice a year in the fall and the fall. By the way, in the fall and the spring, and I use this as an excuse because I have to turn on the water and turn off the water, change the batteries and the smoke detectors, and I tell them it's I have to use it as we don't need an excuse. It's our property, but that's what I tell them so that they feel more comfortable about it. And I do always take a video so then I can see the progression of the unit if it's deteriorating.
Lots of good advice. We're coming up on time here, so we're going to have to cut this short. I know there's a couple Q&As in here. We can follow up on that. You're going to get a recording. There's resources that will be sent out. I mean, I'm excited to look through the resources that are going to be sent. I know there's a lot of good clauses and things that are coming your way and information. And if I can provide a quick summary, hopefully you've got from today, communication is key, team. Having hearts come up on your screen, apparently also awesome. But thinking about communicating with your tenants, putting processes in place so that even if you're brand new, you start to build a community around it. The housing industry is awesome for this. We all have to rely on each other, different individuals as we go through this journey together. That's what helps provide the sustainable space. So whether it's looking at rent reporting, looking at paralegals, screening tools, getting an appropriate lease set up, all having the appropriate insurance in place, document, build your team, build your process, and make sure you're communicating with everyone, your tenants and your team appropriately. So thank you very much to everybody for joining us. Thanks to the rest of our hosts here for sharing all your valuable insights. There's a lot to share. Well, you'll have contact information for everyone, so I apologize we didn't get to all your questions. So feel free to reach out to people individually to either join their groups or to have conversations with them specifically. So thanks again and enjoy your evening.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.